Breaking news, XRP just hit its lowest weekly close in nearly 2 years, dropping below $1 briefly into the 98-cent region. We're going to talk about it today. We're going to discuss the fundamental backdrop, what's weighing on the digital asset landscape, what we need to see the remainder of this week in terms of inflation data in order to get an uplift and a turnaround in market sentiment, along with the Middle East tensions and rhetoric. You're not going to want to miss today's video breakdown, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoy these accurate updates that we've been giving you all for months now, do us that favor, smash the thumbs up button, subscribe. People, it's insane right now what's happening. All the bullish moon boys out there that exist on the internet are getting thousands and thousands of views. Meanwhile, here at CYPRX, we've been given accurate, updated analysis on XRP since last year, telling everybody and warning people that we were going to see a sub-dollar XRP. So shout out to Good Evening Crypto, posted this. XRP, am I the only one asking? In reply back to Ash Crypto's post about XRP dropping to its lowest level in over 2 years. And I responded back to this by saying, we warned people months ago that this was going to happen. If we come over here to the CYPRX YouTube, this particular video breakdown was from 6 months ago at the very beginning of the year. Delta and dark pool software that is available to retail investors that give you guys these levels months in advance. So hopefully you all have been paying attention. If you have been here at CYPRX, you've been following along to the updates that we've been given accurately every single week. Again, it's free to do so. Smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the platform. Let's wake more people up. Let's end this era of hopium and hype, and let's enter into this era of accuracy, transparency, trust, right? And real institutional data. Here's a video from 6 months ago where we called out this 98-cent psychological level, this delta and dark pool that our software had highlighted well in advance. Take a second here and let's listen, and then we'll catch up on today's price action and today's fundamentals. On our radar to the downside, underneath $1.88, we do have some institutional dark pools popping up at $1.60. Below $1.60, we have $1.27. And the lowest dark pool on our radar as of the new update comes in at 98 cents. And so that breakdown was from 6 months ago. You guys can see here, we released this publicly over on YouTube, and this is not to say that we told you so. Again, our goal here at CYPRX is to create a level playing field for retail investors that want real data, real accuracy, real technical analysis, not the overstimulated hopium and hype that exists out there. Now we fast forward 6 months later to today, and the 98-cent target on XRP has been hit to the freaking pip. You can't get more accurate than this. Love to see it in real time. So what do we need to see this week? What has been happening? Why are digital assets down across the board? What's the market sentiment looking like? Let's head over to the private CYPRX community report that we hand type out for the community members inside the Discord every single day to keep them in the loop with what's happening in real time. This is going to cover the current outlook, the current fundamentals, and what to pay attention to tomorrow as we head into getting a data release with the core CPI. So risk assets came under renewed pressure today. And after this, we'll dive into the technical analysis updates. We have some updated dark pools to be mindful of that our software has generated that we want to give you guys. And so stick around for that. We'll go over those levels here in just a second and cover the bullish and bearish scenarios for the remainder of the week on XRP's price action. Risk assets came under renewed pressure today as the markets continued to price in a difficult combination of Middle East escalations, rising energy prices, persistent inflation risks, and uncertainty surrounding the Fed's next move. Crypto pushed into fresh lows with the XRP price falling below $1 for the first time in roughly 2 years, while Nasdaq continued lower into the 29,514 dark pool, our first higher time frame bearish target that we gave to the community members this rising in our morning briefing. The weakness is not coming from one isolated catalyst. The fundamental environment has become increasingly difficult for risk assets as hopes for a near-term U.S.-Iran agreement and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz continue to fade. Middle East risk continues to build. Iran has reiterated that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until Washington meets Tehran's conditions. Those demands reportedly include reparations and changes to the U.S. blockade. President Trump has taken a tougher position on his own, calling for compensation related to the deaths and damages tied to the conflict. This growing divide has reduced optimism that we will see a quick diplomatic solution. The consequences are showing up directly in energy markets, with Brent crude has moved towards the $90 per barrel mark, while refined fuel markets have also tightened. Drone attacks also involve refinery infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Libya, have all added to additional risk premiums at a time when global diesel supplies are already constrained. This creates an important chain reaction. Middle East escalation equals tighter energy supply, which equals higher oil, which equals renewed inflationary pressure, i.e., higher treasury yields, higher rate expectations, and that tends to put pressure on risk assets, particularly NASDAQ and crypto. We also saw another escalation today when U.S. forces disabled a Panama flag cargo vessel attempting to sail towards the Iranian port after it allegedly ignored repeated warnings. The U.S. blockade remains firmly in place, reinforcing how far Washington and Tehran still appear to be from a durable agreement, at least as of time of recording. Against that backdrop, U.S. equities finished lower with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ both declining roughly 0.3%, while crypto experienced substantial heavy selling pressure. Tomorrow, in the main event, we have our attention shifting away from today's geopolitical headlines, although those still remain important, toward one of the biggest scheduled catalysts of the week, which is July's CPI report. Right now, expectations currently sit around these figures. This report carries additional weight because the Fed is now receiving conflicting signals from the economy. The recent labor report showed clear signs of deterioration, strengthening the argument for the Fed to remain on hold. At the same time, higher oil prices and continued geopolitical disruptions threaten to keep inflation elevated. The market is therefore trying to determine whether the Fed is dealing primarily with a slowing economy or another inflation problem. This distinction could determine the next major move across bonds, the dollar, NASDAQ, and crypto. So let's talk about the bullish scenario first. We'll go over upside targets on XRP in this bullish environment, and we'll take a look at price action. Bullish CPI scenario tomorrow. The strongest bullish outcome would be, of course, if headline and core CPI meeting or coming in below expectations, particularly if underlying inflation components continue trending lower. That would give the markets evidence that inflation is cooling despite the recent increase in energy prices. In that environment, we could see Fed hike expectations fall, Treasury yields declining, leading to dollar weakness, liquidity conditions improving, NASDAQ and crypto slightly recovering. Now, of course, we would need continued de-escalation or resolution in the Middle East tensions on top of a cooling CPI figure. The recent weakness in employment would become even more important that we got last week in the NFP data because the Fed would have less justification to tighten monetary policy into a deteriorating labor market. For crypto specifically, this is probably the cleanest macro setup for buyers to begin attempting a meaningful recovery. Middle East tensions cooling, inflation cooling, and then obviously, of course, feeding into last week's lower labor market report, all of those setting up a catalyst for a potential recovery in digital assets. So under that backdrop, under that premise, we're also going to discuss and talk about Canton's price action today, along with Solana and XRP, as we've been covering all those assets accurately for you all as well in these updates. So first, taking a look at XRP's price. We have recently come all the way down into our targets from 6 months ago at 98 cents. I've recently accumulated some XRP at these levels just in case we bottom out from here. But nonetheless, we have some updated dark pools on our charts. So the $0.03 and the $0.09 dark pool have now disappeared. And we now have a dark pool sitting at the $0.0751 threshold, which means from where we currently trade right now in a bullish environment and under the assumption that buyers can continue to absorb sell volume, regain control, create a foothold at 98 cents, and start to make our way back towards a $0.07, that $0.0751 psychological level becomes the first major hurdle for buyers to overcome. In an extreme bullish environment, if we can see buyers break above this, turn the $0.07 into support, and continue to trail higher, then that next catalyst for the upside move on XRP, buyers need to break above a $1.16750, which is July's monthly high. If we can supersede a $1.16, that is going to open the door for a much better recovery on XRP, and I will start to honestly get a bit optimistic, with the next hurdles to the upside coming in between $1.2936 and $1.3682 to the upside hurdles for buyers to overpower. So for now, immediate targets to the upside, $1.0751 in a bullish environment and $1.16. Now we could see a slight drop below 98 cents down into the dark pool around 91 cents, with the delta hovering in between 88 cents and 96 cents in a bullish environment as well, where we see a slight ease or drop down into these lower levels, buyers then reaccumulating, and then pushing price back to the upside through a $1.07, turning that into support, and then continuing with the overall bullish momentum back into a $1.16 and beyond. But for now, the most optimistic scenario would be a turnaround from the 98 cent threshold, a break above a $1.07, turning that into support. So that's right now what I'm paying attention to for the bullish scenario on XRP. Mind you, again, in order for that to happen, Middle East tensions need to cool, inflationary pressures need to also cool, rate hike outlook needs to come down, and we need to see dollar ease, treasury yields ease, and we need to see positive optimistic rhetoric heading into the remainder of this week. In the bearish scenario, the risk is an upside inflation surprise, particularly in core inflation. If CPI comes in hotter than expected, markets could interpret it as a confirmation that inflation remains too persistent for the Fed to ignore. Combine that with oil approaching $90 per barrel, and the argument for another rate hike becomes increasingly stronger. The markets would effectively be confronting a form of stagflationary pressure, labor conditions weakening while inflation risks still remain elevated. And then on top of that, if we see Middle East escalations continue to drive uncertainty, then that would be a case for concern. In that type of scenario, a failure to break above $1.0751 psychological level on XRP and a bearish close below with lower lows and lower highs underneath of it opens the door for a drop down into the next dark pool around the 91-cent psych level. Now, there is a delta hovering slightly above that level in between 88 and 96 cents as our downside targets in a failed attempt by buyers to reclaim $1.0751. Now, this is a far stretch considering where we're currently at. Personally, considering what we're seeing as of time of recording, we are seeing some good absorption taking shape where the sell-off has not continued as of time of recording. Right now, if buyers are able to reclaim that $1.07 threshold, the likelihood of a deeper retracement underneath of 98 cents becomes a lot less likely. We would need to see a bearish close below $1.07, and we would need to continue to see risk-off sentiment unfold and favor sell pressure on digital assets and risk assets alike. So for now, you guys have some downside targets on XRP. I want you to also be mindful of the further downside targets in an extreme risk-off environment that we do have on our radar, coming in at anywhere between 68 cents with the lowest level delta that we have on our radar at around 44 to 51 cents. Now, pause. I know that that sounds crazy and unimaginable right now, but 6 months ago, when we highlighted, if you come down here to our video 6 months ago, when we highlighted the 98-cent psychological level on XRP in this video 6 months ago, and you go back and you read the comments of the video, people were calling us absolutely insane in the comments. They were saying that's never going to happen on XRP. It's never going to happen. XRP is never going to go below $1. And now here we are. Price is below $1. And we warned everybody. And it's not to say that we told you so. It's to show you guys that our software highlights where dark pools and deltas are sitting at from an institutional perspective. These are not our opinions. We don't draw these levels up randomly. This is institutional grade software that we spend thousands of dollars a month on, and you guys have access to it. So use it to your advantage. What I would do, not financial advice, is I would just set some alerts and some alarms at those lower levels in case they come into fruition like they did today, 6 months later, where now you have the opportunity to buy some XRP at a discounted price at 98 cents, right? So I'm personally looking forward to if those levels come into fruition because I will buy a crap ton more XRP. I just recently accumulated some XRP at 98 cents. It's going to be interesting to see how the remaining portions of this week kick off. So you guys have bullish and bearish scenarios on XRP. Real fast, let's just do a brief update on Canton's price action because we've been covering that accurately for you all as well. And we'll also touch on Solana real fast. So on Canton, briefly going over this, we won't take too long. On our last video update, we talked about if price could hold this base between the 0.91 cent cycle level and the 0.83 cent cycle level. And if we could hold above the 0.9453, that would start to open up a meaningful case for a recovery back into the next hurdle at the 12.257. As of time of recording, you can see that the sellers have been absorbed. Buyers have started to make an attempt to defend the 0.9453, but they still have work to do. We are not even halfway through this dark pool up into the 12.257. However, if buyers can continue to hold above the 0.9453, the next and most immediate hurdle to the upside on Canton comes in at the 12.257. A sustainable break and hold above the 12.257 in a risk-on environment in the total crypto market cap, and that can open the door for a meaningful recovery back into the 14.026, and the next upside hurdle above that at the 15.600. To the downside, in a risk-off environment, and a continuation and sell pressure and risk assets across the board, a break below the 0.9453 reopens the door for a revisitation of this most recent base between 0.91 cents and the 0.83. A meaningful break beneath that opens the door for the next dark pull to the downside of the 0.7859. And underneath of the 0.7859, we still have on our radar the 0.5800. However, right now it does look as though buyers are starting to hold and defend at the 0.9453. So we would need to continue to see a risk off catalyst the remaining portions of this week in order to take us into these lower levels. Hopefully, we can see a rekindling of risk sentiment. We can see lower inflation, resolutions in the Middle East tensions, inflationary risks coming down, rate hike expectations dwindling away, and we can see dollar weakening, favoring a risk-on environment. As for Solana, real fast, going over those updates because we've been keeping you guys accurately in the loop with Solana dark pools as well as of recent. In our past video breakdown, we mentioned a sustainable hold above 74.38 would open the door for the 8014 as our next target. As of time of recording, buyers have aggressively broken above the 74.38. We have now retested it. Buyers are starting to absorb some of the sell volume that we saw today. However, buyers still have some work to do. If we can break above the local high at about $77.50, that would open up the door for a nice bullish push up into 80.14. Above 80.14, next target on our radar to the upside is going to be that 85.11 psychological level, $85.11 psych level. Above $85, the next hurdle comes in at 94.16, just to keep that on your radar to the upside, to be mindful of in the coming days ahead. In a risk-off environment and a bearish close below 74.38, that would open up the door for a revisitation of the most recent base at around $72. A sustainable break below $72 or this most recent base on Solana, with a bearish close below 74.38, opens up the door for the next bearish target to the downside of 69.72. Underneath of 69.72, 63.60, and underneath of 63.60, we have 54.71. For now, it does seem as though buyers are starting to absorb some of the sell volume. However, we need to be mindful it could just be sellers taking profit. So we need to see how the remaining portions of this week come out. Don't forget that if you guys want access to these accurate updates in real time, you want information on how our software works, you want accurate education when it matters most. For example, here's the Delta and Dark Pool PDF that goes into detail on what our software is, how to use it to your advantage, whether you're a day trader, whether you're a dollar cost averager. Hopefully now you all have seen 6 months later how accurate our software is, calling out those levels on XRP of 98 cents 6 months ago. And in the comments, it's so crazy to go back and look at how many people were calling us crazy and saying that that's never going to happen. And now here we are. So take it upon yourself to look past the hopium and the hype that exists out there on the internet. Join a community of 3 7-figure mentors that run CYPRX, myself, and the other 2 mentors included, to get good information, get good education, no hopium, no hype, just guiding you guys in the right direction. You guys have access to deltas and dark pools on any asset class or tradable crypto pair that you want access to. We have private community members who have been with us for 3 to 4 years. We would love to have you on the team. Come try it out for a month. Use the software yourself. See how accurate it is on whatever it is that you trade or invest in. We'd love to have you on the team. You now know what to pay attention to in terms of bullish and bearish scenarios. So let's see how the rest of this week fans out. With that being said, I'll try to update you guys as we head into the weekend after the inflationary reports on Wednesday and Thursday with the CPI and PPI following that. And we'll see where the markets are at heading into the weekend. Be cognizant, be aware out there, and I'll see you all in the next video breakdown.